Good morning, everyone. It's morning for me here in Australia. I'm David John Clark, the Late Bloomer Actor, and welcome to Season 3. Yes, it's Season 3. We've made it this far. It's fantastic. I'm recording this episode in November 2023 because I do have a trip to the United States over Christmas and New Year, and this episode will be coming out just as I'm flying back from LA, I believe. So here we are, ready for Season 3 with the wonderful John Orcsik. John, welcome.
Nice to see you, David.
Thank you very much for agreeing to come on the show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on board.
Look, it's a pleasure, not a problem at all. I did a couple of these podcasts. Who the hell was it for? I haven't been in America for about 8-9 years, and is it Aussies over there? There's a group called Aussies or something over there. And
Australians in film.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, so I did a couple of sessions while I was there with them.
Awesome. Well, before we go in, I've got a bunch of questions about acting and training and et cetera. But
sure.
And we're going to go back in time a little bit because you have been in the industry for a while, and I'll leave it up to you whether you say time frames or ages or anything. But can you just give our listeners a bit of an intro into who John Orcsik is, where you came from, your background in acting, and where you are today?
Well,
in summary,
I span a much bigger arc than most people think, and I guess I come from Perth, and I wasn't born in Perth. I was born in Austria, but my parents were refugees, if you like, and we were just dumped in Perth and all the rest of it, and so my education was in Perth, and I had always harbored this, I'm going to say notion, because that's what it is. People either want to be actors or they don't really want to be actors. And they find out that they really want to be actors, then they really work very hard. Those people who think they would like to be actors don't work that hard and then wonder why nothing happens. So I grew up in Perth, and I mean, there was no such thing then. There was theatre. So my training was with an amateur theatre company there. And I did a lot of plays with them I guess I started about 16, 17 years of age, into my teens and very early 20s. And then at one stage I was playing Biff Loman in Death of a Salesman for this amateur theatre company, which was a very good company, by the way. They were very high standard. And the director of the Perth Playhouse then, which would be the equivalent of the Melbourne Theatre Company here, in Melbourne, or the Sydney Theatre Company. Anyway, he saw the play, and he came backstage to see me and asked me if I wanted to be a professional actor. And I said, yes, I do. That's what I'm doing all this for. And anyhow, he then gave me a role in his production of Henry IV, Parts 1 and 2. And I had one line, and I stuffed that up on opening night. I thought, well, that's the end of that. That was a short-lived career. But anyway, I soon learned what not to do rather than what to do. And so I worked there for about 2 years, and then decided, look, it's time to go. You know, I'm 4,000, 5,000 kilometers away from the action, I guess. So I packed up and I came over to the eastern states, as we used to call them over there, and probably still do. And then went to Sydney. I thought it had all happened at once. I mean, my first job within 3 weeks of hitting Sydney, I auditioned for a play called The Knack, and played the lead role opposite Jackie Weaver, who was then also a very young girl like me, and I didn't know who she was. She didn't know who I was. Nobody cared. I mean, none of us were of any note at that time, but we just had a great time doing the play, and we toured Tassie doing it. So I suddenly saw Tasmania, which I'd never seen before either, and it kind of went from there, I guess. You know, but it's a very long story, David. You really want to hear this?
as much as you think it's pertinent. And
I mean, you know, it kind of goes from there to the end of that year. I guess during that year, I was I was the first actor to ever be in a couple of American plays that were never done here, never performed. It was quite amazing. Then I auditioned for the Melbourne Theatre Company at the end of that year. And I can tell you when that was. That was 1969.
Wow.
And I got in, so I spent the next 2.5 years at the MTC as a contract actor. And at the end of that time, not me, I was offered another season. Each season ran for about 5 months. So my agent, who then was Faith Martin and then became Shanahan eventually, said, I think you've done enough theatre. It's time to come back to Sydney and do some film and television. And that was the beginning of the film and TV stuff. Mm-hmm. And it began in little things. I do remember one wonderful moment of being in theatre and we'll talk about the acting thing as you wanted to later, but as we go on. But I was brought up or studied as much as possible the standard Stanislavskian methods, blah, blah, blah. It never quite worked for me. It seemed to work against my own instincts somehow or other. Anyhow, I sort of worked on this and tried, and then I remember I got a role. I had 2 lines on a series called The Link Men. I think it might have actually even been shot here in Melbourne. Anyhow, it was not a very good series. It was a police series. And there were a million police series going around in those days.
Yes.
To come yet beyond that was Crawford's with that 4 or 5, and culminating, I guess, in Cop Shop down the track. But and I had 2 lines. I remember thinking, I am this waiter, and I had designs on this girl who was having dinner with her boyfriend. And I'd made up this whole backstory. I did everything. I missed my cue about 4 times to go on. And the director came back to me eventually. He's an English chap. And he came down, he put his arm around me. He said, my dear boy, just say the fucking line. I thought, you know something? It's as simple as that.
I love that. I used to ask a question at the end of my podcast. I don't do it anymore, about what your T-shirt quote would be, and that could be your T-shirt quote. Just
Absolutely,
say the fucking
just
line.
say the fucking line. I mean, it's resonating now. I mean, that was what, 1972?
Wow.
71 it was, 1971, and I still remember it. I'll never forget it. I mean, I thought, oh my God, that's it. That's the end of it. I'll never get another role again. And it then went on, and then I got another small part and another Crawford's production and another small part. And this is what was wonderful about Crawford's as a company, which doesn't exist today, particularly for young actors. They gave you something, they tested you. Then they gave you something a little bit bigger. Then they gave you something a little bit bigger. Then they go, look, this person can handle it. And after that, I only played lead roles for them.
Wonderful.
And then I also wrote for them. I wrote several episodes of DB4, Matlock Police. I think I wrote one Homicide. And Bluey, I wrote a couple of episodes of Bluey, which is another police series. And then I wrote 4 episodes of Cop Shop eventually, in addition to acting in it. And
isn't that interesting? Sorry, I was just about to say that TV show called Bluey, and now we've got the cartoon. He's called Bluey, isn't he? So
yeah.
I wonder if they drew on that in any way.
No, they didn't. I'll tell you, it was based on Bluey. Australian version was based on. We copied everything that happened overseas, particularly at that time. I mean, Homicide was a copy of, in a sense, of an American homicide police series. I mean, they all were. Bluey, there was an actor, and I can't remember his name. He was a big actor. He was a big guy who played a cop on an American series. It didn't last all that long, maybe 2-3 seasons. And Bluey was an actor here, and I'm trying to remember his name. He was a lovely man. He's actually a comedian, a comic, a stand-up comic. And he was a similar stature to this American actor. So they simply started a show called Bluey. It didn't do that well, and it didn't last that long. I think it went for 2 seasons. I think I acted in 1 episode or 2, but I know I wrote 1 or 2 all those time ago. But that was kind of like, I don't believe in any sense that you necessarily are stuck in one genre, as in an actor only. I think it's a field that is used to express yourself in whatever you want. If you want to write and you think you can, most people think they can't, but they actually can. And so writing and acting, I think, are synonymous with each other. As then comes directing. It's also part and parcel of the entire thing. And there is no reason, well, we can see today, you know, all major stars are also directors and they also write a hell of a lot. But it's made easier for them because they have the clout to do it. In the days when I was doing it, there was none of that. It had to be about, you know, how good was it that you were writing. But I, at that time, had a wonderful 2 or 3 years because every time I came down for Crawford's to act in one of those police shows, they also hired me as a writer because it wouldn't be an extra airfare. So I was down here on my day off as an actor. I went and had a writing meeting, a script meeting. And so then the next time I came down as a script writer for the edit, I was then given an acting job. So I always was getting 2 jobs at the same time. That lasted for about 2 or 3 years. And then I left there and I did a whole bunch of other things. I worked a lot for the ABC in those days. Ben Hall in particular, I played Flash Johnny Gilbert in that series, which was, that was quite a lot of fun, a massive production for the day. I believe that at the time, each episode cost the same as an average feature film would cost to make here in Australia, which was, by today's standards, it's a penny. It's nothing.
Of course.
but in those days, it really was. So apart from Ben Hall, I also did another little series called Beyond the Break, which was about a surf lifesaving, and another one which was fantastic. It was a one-off. It was a telemovie called Displaced Persons, and directed by Jeffrey Knowledge. That was really a very interesting telemovie, in which I played the very opposite. See, up until that time, I was playing tough guys. I was the cop. I mean, that's what Cop Shop eventually happened, and it happened for that very reason. And I didn't care. You know, people saying, typecasting. And I said, listen, as long as you're working, who cares, sunshine?
Exactly.
And there's no such thing as typecasting anyway, because you will only be cast as to how you are perceived, not by what you can do. You know, it's your suitability that matters in a screen test, not your ability, because you've been asked to screen test because everybody already assumes you have the ability. So, you know, so that's kind of there. But that was about a group of people that had fled Europe just post 1945. And I was cast as a Hungarian Jewish scholar. Now, that was so far away from the image, it didn't matter. But then at the time, I was the only, and I had to speak Hungarian. Louis Nara, the late Louis Nara, wrote the script. It was a very good screenplay. And I was the only Hungarian-speaking actor in the country, especially at that age. So they really had no choice. But I did love it.
Cornering the market, as they say.
Yeah, I did love it. And it was terrific. And it opened people's eyes. Oh, God, you know, he just doesn't have to play somebody like, you know, tough guys and all that jazz. So, you know, it kind of went on until, I guess you could say, cutting a long story short, you know, there was theatre happening in between as well. I did the odd play here and there, and then the odd little movie here and there. So, look, I guess you could say, up until the end of Cop Shop, I was literally never out of work.
That's fantastic.
I was very lucky. If I wasn't writing, I was acting. If I wasn't acting, I was writing. The only thing I didn't delve into in those days, which I'm now sorry that I didn't, but and that was, I should have moved into directing as well. And I could easily have, because at Crawford's at that time, all I would have had to have gone is gone down to see Hector and say, Heck, I want to do some directing.
Mm.
And they would have made it happen.
So that so all those early days in acting, reflecting on those roles. So this will test the ages of my listeners here. So we've got Homicide and Division 4 and Matlock, leading into Cop Shop, as you've mentioned, in 1978, playing Detective Mike Giorgio. Is that how you say it? Giorgio?
Correct. Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Which was
I'll tell you that story in a moment too, because that's very funny. But go on.
Okay, definitely. That was a significant point in your career, but all this that learning as you're acting, and this will lead into your development of TAFTA, I'm sure, which we'll talk towards the end.
Totally.
How did these roles influence your understanding of the industry and shape your approach to acting, especially considering the different nature of television production in that era?
Massively in many ways, and not at first. At first, I was kind of doing the same sort of thing, but it eventually made me develop a system of emotional expression that I teach and have done so for nearly 20 years and have improved on it more and more and more and more. And people often say, oh, look, I can't get in touch with my emotions, can't do this, I can't do that. Well, my theory is you don't actually have to. There are things that you can do. And it happened because I was constantly under the pump to find a new way of doing it. Look, David, we did 90 odd episodes a year, 1 hour episodes, 2 hours a week. We were shot the equivalent of a telemovie a week.
Wow.
And so the pressure on you as an actor is twofold. One is sit back, take the money, relax, just do the same thing you do every week, and it's fine. Everyone loves you. You've established this, you've established that, and just roll on and let the money roll in. Well, it never really rolled in those days. But anyhow, the other thing is you challenge yourself as an actor. As a group, we challenged ourselves in that cast, ran some workshops on occasions on a Saturday, and we chose to do Shakespeare, and we chose to do the very opposite of what we were doing so that it would stretch us as actors, and we would discover things about each other that we hadn't known before, that we hadn't explored before. But also it was an exploration of how can I do something more efficiently? How can I do it better? How can I do it more convincingly? How can I do all those questions were to eventually shape TAFTA. But they go back to those days where you are there 5 days a week. You are there from dawn till dusk and sometimes late into the night. You working on a series television in those days, in particular, and something like that, you wouldn't do it today. Today you would shoot an hour a week, not 2. You would get X number of time. There'd be just so many. I just think it's so easy today. So easy, basically, comparatively. Only because of the schedules, the work you were expected to come up with, and at the same time, as a group, I must say, that Cop Shop group, we were all the best of friends and stay best of friends, and we still are best of friends for those of us who are still here. We literally lived in each other's pockets. And that was a development that was also interesting, because normally when you work together with a group, with a bunch of people for a long time, you think, oh, I'm going to get the weekend off. But no, on a weekend, someone will say, listen, I'm having a barbie on Sunday. You want to come over? And we go, yeah, shit, yeah, I'll be there. So we're all there. So we were there Sunday, and then we were there Monday bloody morning, you know. And that happened with monotonous regularity. We even intermarried in the show. Gil married the continuity girl, who then became a casting director, and I married Paula. It was just happening all over the place. And
that shows the difference in the industry size, wouldn't it, compared to today?
Very much so. But I mean, I just think the size today is scattered. Look, and this is not a bitter pill or any of that nonsense, but I look at shows that are coming out today, and I'm not talking as an old man, which I am now, but I don't think I am, nor do I behave like that. But I think, despite the naivety of the writing in those shows, they were not pretentious. I find that today's shows are pretentious. We write for a reason. We must have a social agenda of some kind. And we worry about the social agenda more than we worry about the story. We've lost the art, in my opinion, of storytelling.
That's a shame, isn't it?
I mean, I could be wrong, but not from what I have seen. Very rarely does something come up that I think, gee, that's really good. But, but let me tell you that story about how I got into Cop Shop.
Definitely.
It's really quite amusing. I was brought down to Melbourne in secrecy to audition for this show called Cop Shop, which I thought was a terrible title. And I thought, God, this will never work. Anyway, I came down and went into Channel 7, and there I was, did my audition, and left, flew back to Sydney because I flew me down from that. Unbeknownst to me, my mate Tony Bonner, who wasn't a mate at the time but became later, Tony also auditioned for the role. Tony got the gig for this particular character. Anyhow, I thought, oh, well, that's it. I had 2 other offers on the burn at the time. I had another soapy, and I can't remember the name of it, Young something or other. And also the ABC were doing a thing called, I think it was the ABC, I'm not sure now, called Chopper Squad, where I had played a guest role in of a surf life-saving captain had lost the use of his legs because of mental thing, but at the end of the episode he says, I can walk.
There's story writing for you.
Oh, mate. Anyway, talk about cliche. And then, but they offered me the next season. And I thought, oh, look, I could spend 26 episodes jumping in and out of helicopters on the beaches in the summer in Sydney. That sounds like a lot of fun. And I was about to agree to that series when Crawford's rang my agent, the great Bill Shanahan at the time, and said, we really want John in the show. That role that he auditioned for with Tony was terrific, but Tony's more right for the role. But also that role won't really have longevity. And Tony doesn't want to do it for that long anyway, but we really want John in the show, and we want a different kind of a character. And they said, how many languages can John speak? Because we want him to play a multilingual cop. So we will use the use of those languages. Now, that was going to be a first. And I said, at that time, I think I could speak 4 languages quite fluently still.
Wow.
It's all gone now. Well, I mean, when you're a migrant kid and you come there and you're in a refugee camp, and there are all kinds of different nationalities there, and you're a kid 5, 6, 7 years of age, you pick it up. And it takes absolutely nothing. The communication was easy. I mean, the only language I couldn't speak when I came to Australia was English. But I soon made that happen. And then he wrote back and said, yes, it's going to be 4 languages he reckons he could do. Get away with a couple of others. But and I said, oh, terrific. Well, that's what we want him to do. Now, Bill, who was a very smart man, turned around to them and said, look, guys, that's terrific, but this is a special skill. You're not going to find another actor in the country who can do this. And so apart from the standard fee, which we're going to talk about in a minute, I'm also going to charge you $100 per language per week, whether or not he speaks those languages or not. That's a standard add-on. And they went, oh, right, we'll get back to you. They rang back the following day and said, can John speak Greek? And Bill said, well, it wasn't on the list, but I'll ask him. So he rang me, and I said, no, mate, I mean, I would have told you, but no, I can't speak Greek. So he rang back and he said, no, he doesn't speak Greek. An hour later, they rang back again and said, we want him to play a Greek cop.
Oh, no.
See, it was about the money. They didn't want to pay the extra. They didn't want to pay the extra bucks, and that was really hysterical. And but at that time, I was astute enough as an actor, and I talked about it with him. I remember with Bill, and I said, I'm not going to speak any Greek on the show. I said, people can speak Greek to me, but I will be going back in English. The reason is, David, that once you set up something, you can break the mold. And if I've set myself up as X, I open my mouth to speak. Melbourne has the second biggest Greek population outside of Athens, I believe, or did have. And they'll say, that boy, he no Greek. Because my accent, I will not be speaking properly. So I would rather say I'm Greek, but not speak it. I might say yasu, I might say the odd word, but that would be it. But the fact is that the entire nation believed I was Greek. And in many ways,
made it work.
Still do. That's what I mean. You know, so you got to go. And they said, oh, you're doing it because you got pissed off about the money. I said, no, you don't understand. It's got nothing to do with that. That was something you change your mind? No. Because if I was that pissed off, I'd say, no, stick to the show where you want that best. Anyway, I don't like the title. How wrong was everybody? I think there was a headline in the Sydney paper at one stage when it first came out saying, what a load of, cop this load of crap or something. Well, 6 years later, rating killer later, I mean, it was amazing, but it was an amazing show for that. But, you know, I mean, prior to that, prior to Cop Shop, I mean, I was doing Number 96. I was in the show there for a month or two, and then I did the movie.
And Number 96 was just such a big change for Australian TV, wasn't it? It tested boundaries that had never been tested before.
And, well, exactly. In a very sort of daring way for the times. We don't do that anymore. We don't. That's what I'm talking about today. We're so super safe. We're a bunch of boring, dull wokes. Well, I'm not. But that's what's happening out there. So the material that's coming out is like that. And, you know, it's you can't have that because you've got to have one of those in it and one of those in it, one of them and one of them. Well, what's the story about? We go back to what is my story? And to me, that's what writing is about, story. It's not about making, if the story makes a social comment, great. And if that should, but tell the story. But yeah, I mean, Number 96, I mean, then I had the distinction of having the first male kiss on Australian television with Joe Hasham, and that was very funny. Joe,
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Joe and I killed ourselves laughing. That was in the movie.
And was that done in a comedic way, or was it?
No. It was for real. Look, it was for real. So that's another very funny story. I was down here in Melbourne, and I was shooting a film with Jack Thompson called Peterson and Jackie and a whole bunch of other guys. And I didn't have a huge role in it, but it was a lot of fun. And Faith Martin, who was my agent at that time, just before Bill took over the agency, sent me down the script of the Number 96 movie saying, they want you to play the same character that you played in the series. Well, the guy that I played in the series was a bit of he was a big ladies' man. I mean, I had an affair with Elaine Lee and an affair with two or three of the ladies in the show. I read the script, and this guy's gay. I sent back the script to Faith, and I said, no, tell Bill Harmon I'm not doing this. This is not my character. What a bloody idiot I was. Anyway, the attitude was ridiculous. Anyway, then Bill came back, being a New York Jew that Bill was, said, what? He wants more money. Is that what it is? And Faith said, I don't think he wants more money. I just don't think he likes it. I don't think he wants to do it. He says, what? So anyway, eventually he kept at it and at it and at it and at it. And I had a very good friend who was part of the show at that time. He was one of the producers called Bob Huber. And Bob said, oh, for Christ's sake, John, he was also an American, will you see him? So I said, okay. So it was after I finished Peterson, I went back and I had a meeting with Bill. And I said, Bill, I was playing this wild guy, you know, this guy is sort of off with every woman in the bloody place. And now you want me to turn this character gay? And he turned around to me absolutely with complete open eyes and said, John, everything changes.
Wow.
And I said, in the end I went, bugger it. Okay, what the hell? And it turned out to be one of the best things I've ever done. When I say best things in terms of, I guess, notoriety, but it was also a lot of fun, and I worked with people that I really liked again. And Joe was a great guy. And I think Channel 7, twice I was on a show there they had called Where Are They Now some years ago. And the second time round, they actually flew Joe out of Jakarta, because Joe lives in Jakarta these days, I believe. So they were uniting us back again on the show, which was a lot of fun.
And what year was that on television when you played the gay character?
Well, it was in the movies first.
The movie, sorry, yeah.
And then went to television sometime after that. I'm just trying to think. Must have been mid-60s, 64, 65.
So very much in a time when homosexuality wasn't portrayed in TV. I don't know my time frames of when Sydney started kicking off with the gay Mardi Gras and making, and people coming out and trying to understand and culture changing. So that sort of leads into, we were talking about it before, about the diversity of television and that. So but
you know, the beauty
encouraged this.
No, we did, and I'm totally for it. The thing about it was that I think we did it because we wanted to do it. We found it interesting. We found it entertaining. We didn't do it because we socially felt we must.
Okay.
Which is the difference between then and now. In that sense, nobody cared. Nobody cared. I mean, I must say, most of my friends were gay anyway. They were in the theatre, not in the theatre, film and television, not so much, but I mean, nevertheless. And they were all my dear good friends. I mean, nobody cared. I mean, Susie Maisels, who was a friend of mine, she was also my agent. She was a casting director at one stage. Dear old Susie passed away a couple of years ago. But we used to get up to Kinsella's and hire a bit there and have lunch and watch the gay Mardi Gras from up there. And it was a lot of fun, and it was terrific. And I just think that sort of some kind of acrimony has crept in for whatever reason. I don't know.
Well, see, I think there's a streaming service now, I won't name names, but there's a streaming service that won't take on productions unless you tick all the diversity boxes, and it's got to literally have every single.
That's it. That's my point. You know, and I just find.
So you've got to write your story around that. I mean, that's like saying Dunkirk, for example. When the movie Dunkirk came out, there was a question there why there were no women in the movie. No, well, hang on a second. It's a movie about soldiers in World War II.
Exactly. I mean, the women were not in the field at that time.
No.
I mean, they may be today, but
exactly. And if you wrote a story today, then you've got that ability to put the diversity in there.
True.
And the diversity stories should reflect exactly what they
Absolutely.
are. But like you said, we're now writing stories to tick 200 boxes, which.
Well, we're not writing stories anymore. I think what we're doing is ticking boxes and hoping there's a story in there. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, it's not just Australia, but Australia in particular. I just, and people say, "Oh, well, this is our story." No, it's not our story at all. And you know, to me, it's a bit of a pity. Look, we'll get through it. The pendulum swings, David. It swings this way and it swings back that way, and it will do so forever. And I've seen it. I've seen it go from the extremes of the 60s and 70s, which are amazing fun, to what was in the early 80s. Then it became more and more restrictive. And I know on Cop Shop, there were certain things we could do because it was an 8:30 show. But at a 7:30 show, we couldn't do the things that we did at 8:30.
Mm.
Whereas, of course, today, being a streaming service doesn't really matter. I mean, you can tune into anything you want at any time, you know. So, but you know, I ended up, I guess, forming TAFTA with Paula, curiously enough, way back in 94.
That sounds right.
Well, Paula and I had sort of split up. This is a funny story. Paula and I sort of split up, and both living in Sydney, and I was working for an acting school there, teaching and working. I think I just finished a little stint on Home and Away and various other things. And she rang me and said, I've just been offered a 12-month contract in Queensland for a show called Paradise Beach. And I said, oh, good on you, love. Yeah, we were, funnily enough, we were still friends, which is weird. But anyway, we were and still are very, very good friends. And
that's the way to do it, isn't it?
Life's too short, my friend. Acrimony is a waste of time. So she went off with Jessica. Jessica was about 8 years of age at the time, or 9. And now is in LA directing and doing her own thing, which is wonderful. And she's just had a baby. I've just become a grandfather.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been wonderful.
Awesome.
And so she's gone for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe. And my phone rings, and it's my agent, who was by then someone else. Bill had died and gone, and I was no longer with that agency. Anyway, it was John Cann. And he rang me and said, do you want to hear the good news or the bad news? I said, I stuffed the bad news. What's the good news? He said, well, the good news is that Paradise Beach Productions have asked if you'd be interested in going up there for about 3 months as a guest on the show. I went, oh, great. Yes, love it. That'd be fantastic. I said, yes, you know, all the rest of it. And so I said, oh, it almost as an addendum. I said, what's the bad news? He said, oh, they want you to play Paula's love interest. So it's a bit like Crawford's.
Did she know that at the time?
No, I rang her and said, do you want the good news or the bad news? So we had a big laugh about it. Anyway, I went up there. I did the show there for a while, and then later on I was in another show there. We just stayed up there for about 4 or 5 years. And it was in the January of that year, the producers of the show, who were both ex-Crawford's people, said, look, we hear that you've been doing some teaching. Can you do some teaching up here? Because we are literally hiring 50 worders and flying them up from Sydney, because all the guys around here are so theatre bound, it's a pain in the neck. So that's how we started.
Wow.
By then, as fate would have it, Paul and I got back together again. And then...
And TAFTA
was born, literally then. That was 30 years ago, this coming January. I'll be 31.
I talk about a lot on my podcast about sliding doors and how certain doors open when you just don't expect them. That's
and things happen,
yeah. Today because of that.
I mean, I was still doing a lot of acting then, and all kinds of different shows, not just up there. I did a couple of movies up there, and then I did another ABC show, which I flew down here to Melbourne for. It was a kids' show. I can't remember what it was called, but it was interesting. As I say, it was even then we were concerned with the story, not who was in your story.
Was that the one about the zoo?
You know, but it was, yeah. So it was tough. Then we opened Sydney, and then we opened Melbourne, and then we had 3, and then it's still getting a bit too hard. And the times are tough at the moment. Nobody's got any money, which of course is interesting. Well, or if they do, they're saying, I can't spend it, I'm not risking it. but that's okay. We'll get through this. We always have, and all kinds of things will happen. But I mean, I've had a very interesting. I haven't finished yet either, by the way. Career.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
While I was there, actually doing that, I wrote and directed a telemovie called Academy, which Channel 9 bought. And that was sort of when I started to really delve into the directing part of it, which I quite liked, and I'm messing around with that still at the minute, which is fun. But yeah, I don't know. It goes on, David. I mean, we could be here for a while.
It's brilliant to talk to you because my wife, I've told my wife I was interviewing today, and she's loved all the iconic TV shows, and she just can't believe that we'll be sitting here having this chat about
the past,
iconic Australian history of television. It's just brilliant. So
it is very true. Look, I mean, I can tell you now that I did a God, how many days of interviews for the archives in Canberra a couple of years ago.
Wonderful.
And it took several days. And I thought, Jesus, I didn't think I had done that much until I started to, talk about that stuff. But I think we have a possibility of a very new and vibrant industry. I think we've gone global, and maybe this is a transition as well. And we are in a transitory period like that. So we're not quite sure. We want to hang on to our own roots, but we are also looking global at the same time. So what is it?
You have to, don't you?
Yeah. So what is it that we have can translate into that big picture and not just stay within the small picture? Well, I think it always could, because I think a story is a story is a story.
That's cool. And bringing that, tying that into TAFTA and what your goals are as a training organisation, how does TAFTA operate in this market? What's your goals with training actors as opposed to a standard drama school that offer the 3-year degrees? You branch out with a lot of different casting director workshops. I'd like to quickly touch on your emotions training method as well, that sort of stuff.
I mean, look, what we do is different to what everyone else does. In the first instance, I have ditched all those Meissnerian, Chekhovian, and all those based theories on acting. All that stuff about getting into yourself and finding emotional recall, which is nonsensical because it doesn't exist. What I did do exist, find out that quite ironically because then I began to study the whole emotions thing. Was that actually emotions are molecules that exist in your body, and they are real, and they cluster, if you like, around certain organs when certain stimuli happen. It's too long a story for us to go into it, but that is the basis of it. And there was a wonderful woman, Professor Candace, Candace, P-E-R-T, who actually was able to measure the opiate receptor, which is this part of the molecule of emotion, and therefore proved that this is just a feeling, that this feeling is in fact a physical reality. Now, what we need to do is evoke those physical realities, and then we'll find it so much simpler to tap into those so-called emotions. So I have a system in which to do that. I also think that acting is simple. We don't need 3 years. Look, at the end of the day, someone says, okay, David, I really would like to see you in this. There's the script. Learn the lines and come back tomorrow and let's see how you go. Acting is about showing. It's called show me. You can have 25,000 certificates. You can have a doctorate. It's not going to make you a better actor. It might make you an interesting academic, but it's not going to make you a better actor. Acting is very simple. If you can't learn everything you need to know in 6 months, then go somewhere else. The difference is that all those other institutions, you then get the chance to practice it for a lot longer before you're let out into the industry. But
Yeah, because my son's just finished year 12 and he's applying for Flinders Drama for the 3-year degree. But yeah, he's 17 years of age, and you can't go wrong
No.
purely on that experience level.
See, at 17 years of age, though, today, unlike in the cop shop days in that era, if you like, there are shows for all those people. They're not just token gestures. I did a series called Zoo Family, which was wonderful, but that was a token gesture by Channel 9. At the time, they bought 26 episodes because they had to make up their C classification. Today, we don't care about C classification anymore because that show, although written for kids, can suddenly become global. And now it's a money-making entity, whereas at that time, it was a gesture. I mean, we used to fight so hard to get kids' drama up, I remember. But that isn't there anymore. At 17, I mean, you know, this is what I pointed out to them. At one stage, all your standard institutions didn't take anyone much under 20, 21 years of age because they wanted them to have a little life. Well, the problem is that I've got a bunch of students, for example, who have been with me since they were 14 years of age, are teenagers and advanced teens. They are now 18. They don't need to go to a 3-year institution. They need now exposure and work. And they're the two things. They're the two things that at the time matters, you know, work with actors who know what they're doing, work with the directors who's just saying the fucking line there.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, Connor's been, he's been doing classes for a couple of years with his agency here and been making his own film with a bunch of
Very
people.
good.
So,
well, that's
we watch him on screen.
That's what
wonderful.
you need to
so
do.
It's one of those things because if he gets a call to go to home and away tomorrow, then he might not need to. I've heard of people who've dropped out of their uni because they were on home and away, and it becomes their university in itself.
Look, there is no going way back to when I was 17, 18 years of age and just finished school. I auditioned for NIDA at that time. At that time, it was only a 2-year course. And you didn't get any kind of government assistance. There were no student loans. You had to pay for it. It was straight out, do you want to do that? And I can't remember what it cost, but it wasn't cheap by any stretch of the imagination. Now I was in Perth. And they auditioned all over the country, which is what they do still, and which is fair enough. And I got accepted to go to NIDA. And I went, wow, okay. So I thought, well, Dad's going to have to pay. I don't have any money, etc. Well, my dad was okay. He was reasonably well off. He came, as other people did, to Australia, not being able to speak English, and ended up being a builder. He was actually an architect, but ended up being a builder and building schools and building all kinds of stuff and doing okay. But as life, luck, whatever else would have it, he suddenly fell ill, and he had cancer. So I then wrote back to, I can't remember exactly who they were at NIDA, and said, look, I'm sorry, but I can't come over. My dad's just been diagnosed with cancer, etc. And they were lovely. They wrote back to me and said, look, John, we understand. We'll keep the position open for you for next year. You don't have to audition again. We'll just accept you in, as it were. And I went, wow, that's really, really nice. Wonderful. And then, of course, as life happened, in that, towards the end of that 12 months, my dad died. And it was time for me to go. And by now, of course, money was going to be short and Mum couldn't do it. I couldn't leave her. So I wrote back to them and said, I'm sorry, but I can't go, and pointed out the reasons why. And they then beautifully wrote back and said, well, if you can see your way over here, we will give you the Margaret Gillespie Scholarship to come over. Wow. And but I couldn't do it. It was just not possible. Oh, yeah. So, and it was at that time that I started then to do some really serious roles with this major amateur theatre company. And then came the Playhouse, the director, and me working there then for the next 2 years. By the time I'd finished working with professionals for 2 years, I said to myself, is there any point in going to a drama school? The answer was no, there wasn't. Because I learned more from those guys than I could ever learn in 2 years. it would have been a wonderful time,
Fair
I'm
enough.
sure. And I believe there's a great deal of camaraderie. And John Clark, who was head of NIDA for a long time, wasn't at the time, but a bit later, was a friend of mine. He came to see most shows that I saw. And in fact, he did some workshops, Shakespeare workshops for us at TAFTA in Sydney a couple of times, which was really nice. But, you know, sometimes life has its own weird and wonderful way of shaping your future. And, you know, saying, what if I had done this or not done that? There's no point to any of that or thinking about it. But at the time, that's what happened. And they were my decisions, and they were things that I had to do. Okay, it made it a bit tougher down the track. But then again, I've never been anyone to shirk something that's tough, maybe because that's how we were forged, in the words of the great bard.
Wonderful. Awesome. I'm mindful of the time. I
That's
just have
okay,
one
mate.
quick
No
question. That's on the training front.
Yeah.
We were talking about, you were discussing not being able to go to drama school or going to drama school. Me being a late bloomer actor, having started acting in my 40s, one of my biggest things that I get, and I try to get as much training as I can with, you know, I've done courses with you and I've done the casting director workshops, but is finding that believability. One of my biggest statements that I've got, which is why I haven't landed the 50-worders or the 20-worders, is my auditions, so to speak, are lacking the believability of character. So from your perspective, with all your experience in TV and film and now as a teacher with TAFTA, where can we get that from? How do we develop that ability to come on screen, whether it's on set or whether it's in an audition, and have that believability of character? So someone goes, I'm not watching David Clark, I'm watching David Clark, the actor, that whatever character I'm playing.
Now, you notice I smiled at that. The fact is that we're always watching David Clark. And the more David Clark thinks he wants to be someone else, the less successful he's going to be at that. If that makes sense to you. You see, I am also writing a book.
I was going to ask whether you were.
But it's probably about 3/4 there at the moment. And I have a chapter on just the very thing that you said. It's character. Where that, who am I? Where have I come from? What do I do? I throw all that out the window. To me, character is about detailed behavior. And the believability is really something that can only come from you. You have to stop worrying about who you are. It's David Clark delivering the lines and the moment with the truth as David feels it. Not sees it, but feels it. Once you do that, you've got character. I'm going to tell you a quick story about that, fairly recent, last 3 or 4 years. I did an episode of Dr. Blake's Murder Mysteries. And I'd auditioned for the show a couple of times and was unsuccessful. On this particular time, I went in there and Lou Mitchell was the cast director, a wonderful lady. I've known her for many, many years. And the character was a gypsy, leader of a gypsy band whose daughter was murdered. And he obviously is a suspect. And the scene was him discussing with the Dr. Blake character stuff about his daughter, and he's emotional. So he had to be crying or near crying or apparently crying or damn near. And at the same time, they said, can you give us a mid-European, Hungarian, Transylvanian, Romanian accent? So I said, yeah, wow. I can do that. So I said, I remember saying, my dear doctor, you have no idea what you are talking about. Anyhow, I did all that and did the tears and all that and left. And then I was on my way home when my phone rang. And it was the director who was going to direct it. And I remember Ian rang me and said, can I talk to you? And I said, only if you've cast me. It's a joke. And he said, well, of course I have. Why am I fucking calling you? And we had worked together on the ABC, God knows, way back 40-odd years ago. He was then an editor, and he was editing all those shows that I was talking about back there in the ABC, and he was a director. Lovely, lovely man. And he said, how do you feel about long hair? And this is how he put it. How do you feel about long hair? I said, what do you mean, how do I feel about long hair? I said, I don't have the hair I had when I was in Cop Shop, mate. He said, no, I know that. I said, and I said, I'm not going to be able to grow it because we're shooting in, 6 weeks? He said, yeah. He said, but don't worry, but how do you feel about it? I said, what you're really saying to me, Ian, is that you want me to have long hair. Is that right? Or you would like me to have long hair? You would like me to consider that? He said, well, yes. I said, fine. I don't mind. That's cool. I said, I haven't even thought about this, but let's say cool. He said, good. Thank you. Hung up. And my phone rang again in the car just before I got home. And he said, how do you feel about a beard? And I said, 6 weeks? I said, yeah, I can grow you something in 6 weeks. It ain't going to be massive. It was about that length. I said, but I can grow you something in 6 weeks. I said, you want me to have a beard? He said, that would be nice. Do you mind? And I said, no, I don't mind. It's great. I got home. I was inside. I wasn't there long. And my phone rang again, and it was Ian again. And I said, we got to stop meeting like this, mate. You know. And he said, how do you feel about long fingernails?
Oh, my
God.
God.
Said, what? He said, how do you feel about long fingernails? I said, I don't care. Why? You want me to have long fingernails? He said, yes, I think that would be fantastic. I said, all right, Ian, okay. I said, I haven't even thought about this. All I've done is cried and given you a bloody accent, and now we're doing all this. And he said, I said, why do you want me to have long fingernails? He said, well, I've got this shot in mind because you will be a suspect. Because on that show, everybody was a suspect. Obviously, it was a whodunit.
He's a suspect.
And I said, yes. He said, I've got this shot in mind where I want to shoot past your hand, which is holding a walking stick, to the police who are talking to you. And I just think I'd like to see those talons as I shoot past your hand. I said, what you're fucking saying is you want me to have a walking stick as well. He said, oh, do you mind? And that was always a do you mind? And I said, no. I said, you know how much work you've just saved me? I said, I had no idea what I was going to do, but now you have given me a character image. Do you see what I'm saying here? Suddenly, the outside went on, and there it was. All I now had to do was deliver the accent and the emotions where necessary. And it's like instant character. And I know you can say, well, how about a business owner? How about that? The same thing applies. The fact is you can never get away from you. And that's one of the biggest mistakes actors make. They think I'm playing someone else. No, you're not. If you were really playing someone else, there'd be a whole bunch of white-coated people coming to take you away because you'll be a menace to society. You can only ever play you with the emotions that you see fit, not necessarily the emotions as written by the writer, because that's the writer's emotions. When this happens to you or you go through this situation, I don't do and never have done so-called script analysis. That comes later. What I do is I attach an emotion to the scene and to the character, and I rehearse it with that emotion. Then I attach another. There are 5 basic emotions. We don't have time to go into that at the moment. 6, perhaps, actually.
People can buy the book when it comes out.
Yes, they will. There's an entire chapter devoted to it, which has already been written. It's about 15 pages, but examining all those things. But once you've attached these emotions to the scene and to both the characters, put it down and go away. Come back 24 hours later and see what has happened in your subconscious. See where now your impulses and your instincts point you to. Now you can rationalize. Now you can say, yes, That really works. That works. No, that doesn't work all that well, but this does. Now I can put together the performance. But we tend to do it the other way around. We try and put together the performance before we've actually done the performance. That's in a sense, that's the basics of my approach. And I don't think that any of that, particularly emotional recall, where am I going to get this from? Truth in performance. Oh my God, truth in performance. I'm sorry. Those things always drive me bananas, and they are so old-fashioned. They belong to a theatrical era of the 1930s that has stayed with us forever and a day. And because the teachers have stayed with us, and then one after another. And yeah, I'm not going to go into it, but I mean, it's just because people do what they want to do. If they want to teach that, they can teach that. If people want to learn that, they can. I abhor my students or my actors writing on their scripts. Why do you want to write on your scripts? The dialogue is there. The first thing I do is I will read the script, and I will read the script a couple of times. So I kind of have an idea of, I am interested in, do I have a story in my head? And what is the sequence of events in the story? And then I'll go scene by scene by scene by scene. And in each scene, I'm not going to work out all those who am I, what am I, where are my feelings. And no substitution, none of that stuff. And I'll tell you who taught me this. It's not, I wish it was my idea, but it's not. It was the wonderful George Mallaby, who I'd worked with for quite a few years, one time or another, and George and I became friends. Again, George is sad you're no longer with us. With Cop Shop, it was that hard. The pressure was hard. I had to learn so many lines, and I'd never done that before on a constant basis, week in, week out. And I was going to leave the show. I thought, no, I can't handle this.
Wow. So
George asked me to go over to his place, and I said, I can't come over, mate. Anyway, I've got too much to do. He said, come over. And he taught me how this can happen and work, and without me losing it or anything else. And he said, you get all the scripts 6 weeks in advance. I said, yep. He said, good. Read them all twice. Take a day out on a Sunday to read them all. Don't do anything else, just read them. And he said, then look at what you're going to do next week. He said, once you've read them and read all the scripts, you now have a story in your head. You know what your story is for the next 6 weeks. I said, yep. And he said, then go back and read what next week's episode is that you're going to be shooting. So I do that. He said, read that. Read, never learn. I don't learn lines. Never learn. Read. And I read them through.
Interesting.
He said, now pull out your scenes and put them in chronological order. You're not going to be shooting in chronological order because that's not going to happen. Scene 1, you may shoot on Friday and not on Monday. He said, but chronological order matters because you again will have this week's story in your head. You know what you're going to be doing. Now read them scene after scene after scene. Now put all that away. And I said, yep. And now I learn the lines. He says, no, now you know the lines. And he's right. I pull out the scene for tomorrow that I'm doing, or 2 or 3, and look at them one at a time only. And I know what I've read. I've read it now so many times. Oh, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And I know what I'm saying. I've applied some emotional detail to all those things. I don't have to go to the trouble of going, now tell me, where were you on the night of the 4th? It's already there. Now I've just got to apply myself and attach myself. Mike Giorgio was me in many ways. I'm not Greek, but I'm not Australian. I'm European. I was a martial artist. Mike Giorgio was a martial artist. I was this, I was that. There were so many things that belonged to Mike, that belonged to me. And in all other characters that I've played, and so does everybody else, they belong to you. And that you make them belong to you. You do the study and go, well, I'm playing a doctor, I'm playing a physician, I'm playing that. And again, you go back to what are the physical things that I have to do physically? And then The rest will just come to you. You can never get away from David. This is what I'm saying. As an actor, I can't get away from me. I can get dressed in a million kind of different outfits, but I can never get away from me. And as long as I don't try and become that nonsense, I will still be that. You will still believe me as that character. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I'm taking so much away from this. It's fantastic. It's, we get into our heads so much, and there's, especially with the internet now, there's so many courses, there's so many books, there's so many people yelling and screaming at you, do this, do it my way, learn from this. You have to, this is how you do it, right on your script. And I need to go back to where I was, where I started. And I started on a very similar approach with you. I've never written on my scripts. I learned a lot of my beliefs from Jeff Seymour.
Jeff is a great guy, and his book is a very good book. I don't agree with everything, but nor should I. But no, and nor would he agree with everything I will have written. But yes, it's a very good book, and it makes perfect sense. The Real Life Actor is a very good book. I recommend it highly.
And I think just everything that you've just said in the last couple of minutes, I'm going to go back and listen to it myself, and everyone listening to the podcast should really just dive down into it, because I think there's so much in that as an actor.
I recommend two other books to you, David. Let me just see if I can see them there very quickly. One is called How to Stop Acting. It's a wonderful book. Mm-hmm. And the other is The Science of On-Screen Acting, I think. Can you excuse me for 2 secs?
Certainly. Yep.
I recommend 4 books, really, and Jeff's is one of them. The other one is Harold Guskin's book, How to Stop Acting.
I have seen that one. I don't have it myself, but I have seen that one.
And the other one, a little more complex, but this one, The Science of On-Camera Acting by Andrea Morris. This is a fantastic book. Absolutely brilliant.
Okay, that's a new one.
And I also think, combined with all that, everybody should read The Writer's Journey.
I have heard of that one. I've heard it's a very good book.
It is not just for writers, but it's also for actors. What it makes you understand is what's important is not who you're playing, but what your function is. What's your function in the story? Once you can nail that down, or what is your function at any one particular point, not who you are. What is your function? My function in this scene is to give you the shits. For example, not because I'm a bad person, not because I'm going to be an ugly guy, not because I'm going to be a bad this. No, my function here in this scene is to frighten you. That's it. It's that simple. So I will play the scene with that in mind, nothing else. Or my function here is to lure you into something. Function is almost more important, because the character won't change. You are the character. You can't change the story. Look, the story starts here and finishes there. That's the story. You can't change that. The author has written the story. How you tell the story is up to you. And each actor will tell the story differently, but it'll be the same story. That's what's important.
Love it.
Beautiful.
Well,
David?
Thank you very much on that note. I think
so. Anytime, mate.
Thank you very much. Is there anything you want to end the show with? Anything you want to say to my guests or people listening?
Well, if they're here, I mean, hop onto our website and have a look. Basically, that's what I'm saying. Look at our website. We have got a course that it's going to be beginning in early February next year, and it's 30 weeks, 3 10-week semesters, 3 full days a week.
Nice.
And we guarantee you will have an agent at the end of it. And in fact, probably in the beginning. But you will learn more. As someone said, and I believe it's true, and I'm not pumping myself up or anything. Someone came and said to me, I learned more here in a week than I did the entire 2 years I did somewhere else.
Wow. I mean, everything I've done with TAFTA has always been brilliant, and I've sat in a room with you yourself, as you know, so always walk away a better
David,
actor.
I think that the more you also begin to realize that acting is simple. It's child's play. And when I say child's play, because that's what children do, they don't ask questions.
Children do.
They don't get in their heads. They tell the story as they feel it and they see it and they move on. And they can go from one emotion to the next and not worry about where did that come from? How did I get that? Oh my God, that's us. Once you're in your head, it's very hard to get out of it. And that's the whole point about everything is. And that's the trouble with all the other complexities. It's not complex. Acting is simple, you know, and don't worry in the scene that I'm doing now with you. I'm not going to care what happened 4 scenes ago. I'm only focusing on this scene right now, at this moment. This is the only moment that matters. The moments that happen to make this happen, oh my God, you wouldn't think about that. Why? That's the story. You're the writer or the director. Now, the director has to think about all those things, right?
Of course.
But not you. Your simple job is to deliver you here and now with something that you feel, not see, not think about, not articulate, but something that you sometimes can't articulate, and something just happens, as you'll find with Harold Guskin in that book. And he says, just try and do it differently. I had a very good friend of mine who sadly is no longer with us in LA. And he used to rehearse his people and say, I just want you to do all the cartoon voices you can think of with this scene. I don't want you to do anything else, just all the cartoon voices. Focus on those. And everyone did. And on the focusing of those, they then suddenly knew the lines. They absorbed a whole bunch of stuff they didn't even know. Subliminally, you know, that happened. Yes, and then you produce it, take after take after take. But each take is slightly different anyway. No 2 takes are ever the same, I think. I'm sure.
Awesome. Awesome.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. And just quickly, John, when's the book due? Do you have a title on it yet?
Pressure's on. I'm at the moment, I'm writing a sitcom at the moment because I'm doing a course starting in January. Well, it's Comedy Capers 2. The first one was on sketch comedy, and this is a course that's on sitcoms, and I'm writing the sitcom for the course. So be fun. Thank you, David.
Wonderful. All right, John. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And ladies and gentlemen, you can check John out at tafta.com.au. And
thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you will, David. See you later.
Next month.
Bye.
Thank you.